So if you do have any questions that arise during the course of my demonstration, and it's a burning question you want me to answer, you can type it in the box. And if I don't see it for any reason, I will catch up with you afterwards. So the format will be exactly the same as last time round. This is the formal recorded part of the class. And I'll do my demonstration. I'll ask any questions as we go along, I'll answer any questions as we go along I see pop up. And then at the end of the session, probably, me talking, demonstrating will be, I don't know, 20, 25, 30 minutes, I don't know. And then I will take you off mute, and then we can have a proper two-way conversation. So perhaps if you want to get practicing that chat button, leave me a yes if you're planning to stay and make and create with me afterwards. And I've got an idea of how time's going to go. And of course, during that session afterwards, we can have a look at what flowers you've got, what greenery, what you've been foraging for, and of course, what container you're going to be using for class today. So we can chat about that. And I'm happy to stay here until the end of the session for as long as you want, just talking and chatting and learning from you as well. So it looks like we've got some staying afterwards. That's always good. So before we get going, I'm going to move this out of the way just temporarily and just talk about last week's flowers. So I'm hoping actually that last week's flowers are still lasting quite well for you. So for me, they're not too bad. And the reason for that is a lot of the materials I used were dried, and the things that were fresh were my, oh gosh, I can't remember what they're called, sunflowers. So the sunflowers are sort of drying out in situ in my arrangement, and I can either leave them there to sort of gradually age and change over time, or if I wanted to, I could pick out the petals and just leave the head of the sunflower in there with the sort of interesting, the green sepals going round and like the velvety smoothness in the background. Can you see that as I've picked out the petals, you lose the definition because it just looks like a black hole in the camera. But of course, when I look at it up close, I can see that it's there. So my flowers have lasted quite well. We'll get a report in from how your flowers are doing later on. I'm just trying to remember which was the right way around for this one. I did make a tiny change though. I always like to have a little tweak afterwards. I know that's the front because my hydrangea is in there. And originally I had put the sort of the South African foliage in the back, in the front. And when I looked at it, that sort of gave me a big black hole. So I did switch round that little focal area. So there's always things that need adjusting a little bit. And I think probably my sticks are slightly lower than they were before. And I may have raised the Jerusalem sage up a little bit to just get that outline. So I hope you're enjoying those. I envisage that I'm probably just going to leave this in the pot, not for the whole 10 weeks of the class, but definitely until we sort of get more into the Christmas vibe. So if you come around for a cup of tea, anytime up to, the middle to the end of November, you'll probably see this on the side. It's just going to sort of dry and, be held there in situ. So I'm going to move that one out of the way. And then just a quick chat about what we're doing next week. And that is why there's a pumpkin on my table. Next week, it's half term next week. So I don't know if that affects whether or not you're going to be able to join me live, but I have bought myself a pumpkin. So this was £1 from the supermarket, and it's quite a small pumpkin because the arrangement we're going to do is actually to stack some pumpkins, and I couldn't find progressively smaller pumpkins. And what I'm probably going to do is actually buy some squashes from our local farm shop. So I may keep this one as a base and go smaller and smaller on top, or I might buy 3 brand new squashes. And what we're going to be doing is stacking them up. And I'm not going to be carving the pumpkins or squashes. I'm not going to be cutting the lids off, anything like that at all. It's purely going to be a feat of balance and having the stacking up. And you've got options of whether you want to have the layers. Think of it out of Victoria sandwich, and that jam layer of Victoria sandwich. Do you want to use fresh flowers or dried flowers, or silks, of course? And whether you're going to put a piece of flower foam that you're going to layer your flowers up with, or whether you want to go foam free and use moss, or even to use to use hay. So I'm getting some comments that you're looking forward to that one. So I will say that when you're buying your pumpkins, you might want to just take a little minute and just stack them up in the shop to make sure they balance a little bit. They don't have to be dead balanced, because we will be cushioning the layers with the infill, the jam layer in between. But if you've got really odd shapes and sizes, or you've chosen 3 that look the same size, you might get a bit of wobble problem. So I would go progressively smaller if you can, and go that way. And the reason I'm not carving them, A, it's too messy, B, they just start to rot. And again, I'm thinking this pumpkin arrangement can be for Halloween, but also it's more embracing the autumn season. So that's why I'm not drawing spooky faces, because I don't just want it for Halloween. Again, I want it to last a bit longer and to take me into week 1, 2 of November as well. If you do decide to buy squashes, I will say that squashes, of course, they are a food item, and so they're grown for the really thick flesh in them. So if you did want to carve a squash, it's going to be really tricky to do. So if you decide at home to do any carving or cutting off the lids, you do want to get the carving pumpkins, the ones you get in the supermarket, because they've got a much thinner skin and it's much easier to carve in them. So that's next week. So I have looked up some Pinterest inspiration pictures for you. So they will be included in the newsletter that goes out with this video. And also I've updated the handout for next week as well. So you'll get my little sketch drawing and you'll get some pictures as well. So I'm just going to move that out of the way. Precariously balanced. It's not going to precariously balance. I'm going to have to put it on the floor. There we go. So on to this week. So we're going to be using a windowsill vase. So I don't know, ladies, if you're here and you've got your vase in front of you, do you want to wave it in front of your faces? And I can just, yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, looking good. Yeah, looking good. And I can see a modern interpretation of the windowsill vase. That is perfect. So I don't want you to be too anxious in the event you haven't got a perfect vintage vase. It doesn't matter. In fact, I know that one of you's bought a gravy boat to work in today, and you could do the same arrangement in a gravy boat. It could be in, a loaf tin, anything that's watertight. And of course, it could be in a really modern piece of ceramicware as well. It's entirely up to you. And we're going to go foam free today, but going foam free is personal choice. And of course, we're trying to encourage, in the world of floristry and flower arranging, to go foam free because it's better for the environment. But one of the questions I did have asked of me is what arrangements can you make in this type of container? And I would say the world is your oyster, because first of all, you might decide to put flower foam in your dish, and therefore you could do an arrangement which was long and low and flowing out of the sides. You could do one that was a symmetrical triangle, an asymmetrical triangle, and then you could go foam free. So your mechanics, which I will show you, just means that the design will be a little bit lighter in look, because you won't be able to put, you've got to anchor your stems in, and I think foam free always gives you a slightly lighter, finer look to your arrangements. And sometimes I've gone super modern with these as well. I've packed it out with moss and actually put Christmas baubles on the top, so it's just been like a pincushion almost to do that. So I can see in the comments that you're besting each other on whether or not you've got these containers or not, so that's nice to see. And the thing is, I would say that you do have to keep your eye out in charity shops, and if you've got a flower club, whether you've got a sales table, particularly if you've got older members of your flower club who are trying to declutter and downsize. That's normally a good source for these vases. But I have taken to putting notes in my phone of what things I'm looking out for, and it really does make you focus and see whether you can find these things. So these are just all lucky finds over time. So let's get started. Now for today, I'm going to, rather bring the second camera over the top, I'm going to arrange facing you, and I hope with my dark top on, which yes has been washed since last week, that you will be able to see what I'm doing silhouetted against me. And if there's any problems with seeing that, do let me know. And just to bolster things up a bit, I've got a couple of books which I'm using just so you can see. I'm lifting my container up a little bit, but actually when I finish my arrangement, I may well put it on my books and have that in my living room. It's always a good way of lifting things up, even though the container is lifted up. You know, just another little lift is going to work really well. So the question is, how are we going to get our flowers to hold in place? And what we're going to be using, all sorts of things you could use. You could use the old-fashioned pin holder. We've done that before in staycation flowers. You could make use chicken wire or make your own chicken wire, and we've done that in the very early edition of Zoom Flower Class when we were first in lockdown. But for today's project, I'm going to use pot tape. So this is the tape that we normally use if we are using our flower foam. So I'm going to make a grid here on my tape, and I'm sure that many of you have done this before, but equally I know there are some newbies who are here in class, so you may not have seen this before. I'm just cutting off the loose end there. Like sellotape, I turn the end over just so I can find it. So what I'm going to do is to create a grid, and of course you can't see that quite so well now, but you will be able to see it when I lift the container over to you. So I'm putting it across my container, and you can see there that a great big long tail of tape. I'm doing that partly for demonstration purposes, and that's why I've chosen my white pot, so that you can see what I'm doing. So it's not very attractive, this grid, but you can tidy this up a little bit. So I happen to have gone three bits of tape across. It's a bit like drawing a noughts and crosses board, but you may need more stripes going across. And then I could go across like this. What I'm doing here, my bowl's slightly shaped, so I'm anchoring it on that end. And then instead of going straight across, I'm touching it down so it glues down on each of those little bits of tape like that, and then anchors firmly on the top. And then I would do more lines as well. I'm hoping you get the idea with that. I am going to move that to one side though, because I have prepared one earlier, and this is it. So I have gone sort of quite tape mad here. If you're using chicken wire, yes, you would scrunch up your chicken wire here. Don't scrunch up your chicken wire too much though, because you want to keep some of those holes there. And I would say you can either submerge your chicken wire totally inside your container. I normally have it sort of just mounded up a little bit, and then I would just take the chicken wire in place just so it doesn't move around a little bit. But this is a great trick for any kind of vase, whether it's something vintage or something brand new, newer, just to hold your flowers in place. And depending on, I'm going to thread the flowers through the holes. So if you know that you're using lots of fine materials, it may be that you want to create even more squares, gaps than I have done. But if you're using thicker materials, you might want to have bigger holes. So you can see the ugliness that gets created. It almost looks like a Halloween smile there. So what I've done, this is something we talked about last week when your tape wasn't sticking onto your container properly. And sometimes the reason for that can be if your dish is wet, if you've got water and flowers around. So you do need to make sure your container is really, really dry, because the tape won't stick quite so well. And the other thing you can do is just to hold everything down, is to take another piece of tape and run it across the edge here. And that will anchor those pieces of tape in front, a bit like that. So what you can see here is originally I had all my pieces of tape coming down here, and then when I put my tape across like this, to anchor it down, I then picked up the little bits of tape that were hanging down and I trimmed them off so they were level with the tape at the top, and that just makes it a tiny bit neater. You can see I've done it there, just looks more presentable. So in the event that I don't cover up my tape, I'm going to try and cover up my tape, but it looks a bit more intentional. Perhaps I could convince you that that was part of the pattern on the dish, but it doesn't look so obvious as, you know, so it's about workmanship and just neatening things up a little bit. So I'm going to take that tape off there because I haven't got time to tidy it up at the moment. So we've got the finished look neatened up, and then the one that's a bit untidy. So when I'm creating with you afterwards, I will be covering that up neatly. But for the moment, it will serve as a reminder that this is the front part of my arrangement. So at this point in proceedings, I would be pouring my water into the container. So I've actually got, well, you can see it just off the shot here, my indoor watering can. You would go to the kitchen sink and fill this up. Now, I'm not going to put my water in now, because you can guarantee that at some point I'm going to want to hold this up to the camera to show you something, and water's going to spill out everywhere. But as you're making it home and you're not showing anybody as you go through, when you've done your tape, that is the moment to put your water in. I'm just going to put mine in right at the end when I've finished. Sue's saying white hot tape wouldn't show up. Yes, and you can also get clear. And I will see if I can find links to those and put them in the newsletter afterwards. I don't know if it's just me, but I found the clear pot tape to be slightly thicker, and I found it doesn't stick so well. So it may just have been my tape that was problematic, but I certainly think many years ago I've seen white tape, and of course that would blend in much better. The reason this tape is dark is because it goes with the plastic pots that all the florists use. So yes, keep an eye out. If you ever see any white tape, do take advantage of that. So next question is, what am I going to use to put into my arrangement? So I'm thinking, again, before I start, or before you start, what shape are you going to make? I've just said, you can make any shape you like, but I thought I might make something, I could do it asymmetrical. I could have a high point here and a bit lower, or do I want to sort of curve out, do I want to curve down? So part of me has an idea that I want some sort of movement, a sort of slope and a scoop, but I don't quite know how it's going to turn out. And that'll be governed by the actual plant material that I've got. So when I went collecting my bits and pieces for class, instead of just randomly cutting, I was trying to pick pieces that looked autumnal, because we are in autumn and I wanted the arrangement to look seasonal, but also had a natural curve to them. So I'm going to work with a natural curve and let the flowers and the greenery, the foliage, tell me where it wants to go. So shall I show you what I have got on my shelf behind me? It looks like I've made an arrangement already, doesn't it, in my little container here. I'm just going to put that down so I don't knock it. I have got for colour and texture, leaves from a grapevine that are just turning colour, and I thought they would be really good to place down low to cover up my tape. And then Virginia creeper, that's got lots of colour showing on it too. I have got a little bit of my skimmia that was left over from last week. Again, it's got those russet tones, which are absolutely beautiful. I have got I've got a piece of fennel that we had last week as well, Japanese maple out of my garden, and some ivy again. I picked some rose hips, and I've also picked some old man's beard, which looks absolutely beautiful at this time of the year. And I specifically picked it when it was still really crisp. And you'll know that as this matures, it starts to go fluffy, and that's the bit that flies around. So when you bought it indoors, because of the warmth of your living room, it'll start to go fluffy. So I have actually sprayed it. Now, this is a bit of a test. I have got some leaf shine, so recommended to me by a florist friend, that she said, why don't you put leaf shine over your seed heads, and that'll hold it in place. So in a well-ventilated space, I did this on my patio table, like that. And if you have hairspray, that can do the same thing. I know that people do, I think they pretty much get guaranteed results with hairspray, but I don't have any hairspray. So I'm hoping that the leaf shine with the sort of plasticky texture to it, I guess, is holding the seed heads as they are, so they will stay in this lovely crisp form. So I'll report back next week as to how that went. And then at the back here, I've got a little bit of eucalyptus. I've got some rosemary, and I'm not sure what else. Oh, I've got some beech leaves. That's what I picked this morning. some beech. The leaves are going over, so they're damaged, but I quite liked the shape of the twig, the sort of curve to it. So I've got a bit of a, you know, again, another harvest festival mess going on here. And if I reach over for my flowers, I'm not sure I'm going to use my flowers because I've got such an interesting contrasting textures and colours with my greenery that I'm not sure I actually need them. So I've kept my flowers to an absolute minimum. But of course, it's entirely up to you what you do. If you want to go more flower heavy, that's fine. It's just that I didn't have any. But over here, I have got cosmos from our garden, which is just a few stems. And those of you who grow your own flowers, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you've got. So just a few bits of cosmos. I've got some sedum. I've got some snapdragons over here. And I went to the supermarket this morning when I was picking up my pumpkin, and I bought on sale. This was a £5 bunch of flowers, reduced down to £3, with the snowberries in it and a lovely ornamental cabbage, a fricassee cabbage head there, and then a stem of white asters. And that sort of thrown me because I really liked the look of the snowberries, but it's kind of changed my colour palette from the autumn, the russets and the reds, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure I want white with it. And I just thought I'm going to splurge, and I did kind of think, well, perhaps if I didn't want white berries, I might spray them orange, and that'll be something else that I'll be doing after class, just to have a look and see what's going on. So I'm going to move. I'm just conscious I've got a hedgerow full of things here, and let me bring in my little side table. You can see what I'm doing more clearly. Create some space. So the first thing we need to do is to make a commitment to put some flowers into your container. So snowberry is getting a thumbs up, maple, and you're asking whether you can give a list of materials that I've used. Well, why don't you? I'll try, but if I don't remember, if you notice on the handout for class, there's quite a blank space. If you've got that printed out, you could just make a little handwritten note of that if you've got time to do that, or a scrap of your own paper. So of course, what I've got is just what I happen to have available from what I've already got on flower arrangements at home. I've picked things out, and you know, my dog walked this morning, and what I happen to find in the supermarket. So it's not a precise list of what you need. It's just what I've got in this version of events. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in, sort of introduce myself to my greenery. So I've got this piece of greenery here, and I want to create a bit of a curve. And I need to decide whether I'm going to keep the leaves on this piece of greenery. So they are beginning to turn. These ones don't look too bad. Some of them just look as if they're not diseased, but they're just too mottled. They're not pretty. So I am thinking, well, that's curving up. Of course, I could do it so it curved down, but today I want to show off my lovely container because I've got the little, the little handle showing off. And I'm thinking perhaps I could put that in, with a scoop upwards. So I will recut the stems at a sharp angle. And are my florist scissors strong enough for this? Yes, they are. I do have my secateurs to hand. And what will happen when I slide this into my container is it won't stay where I want it to, because there isn't enough material to hold these stems in place. So when I do that, it's just going to go like that. It's a bit disappointing. But that is because you need to get a quantity of materials into your container before they will hold in place. So I will be adjusting that later. So don't be put off when you put things in and you think, oh, it's just going to fall down. I'm going to take some of those leaves off because they've been nibbled. So I'm going to just use the natural curved stem just to get a little bit of height. So I can just pinch those off like so. Recut the stem. I'm going to go in that way. So imagine when I finished, my pieces are going to look a little bit like that. And of course, if you think, gosh, it's a bit too big for me, you come in shorter. So again, you will know exactly where you're going to have your, put your arrangement. And if you know you've only got a tiny bookshelf, make it for the size of your tiny bookshelf. But this gives you a rough idea of what I'm going to do. This one seems to be sitting fine, and this one, perhaps it's top heavy or just too long, is rolling. So we're going to just hold that for the moment. What will help is when you get some bushier materials in the bottom, and this is a way of physically weighting your arrangement down. So you'll have the visually heavy stuff, the focal area, down at the bottom, and then it's going to taper out to the sides a little bit. So that's when I need to think about getting something perhaps that's really big and chunky to hold down, visually hold down the centre of my arrangement. So I'm going in with some ivy. This is a slightly different variety from what I've got at home, with bigger heads than the ones I've got. So I'm just going to clean off the leaves and then think about, well, where do I want that to go? Do I want to drape over? Do I want it to stand up? At the moment, I'm just trying to create a dense centre. So I will take off, I'm going to cut it in half. Like that. And again, that leaf there is going to be in the water at the bottom. And you don't want anything in the water because it will send your water slimy and off. So that will sit down there. See how it just stands? Because the grid there is supporting it. And I'm going to put a central area of my ivy in the middle just to fill out. So having them there. Just a central part like that. Dare I roll it forwards? But you get the idea. I've just put dots of greenery in. So let's see whether that will hold up. It's still not enough to hold up. Oh, nearly there, not quite though. So with the little bits of the other end of the stem, think about using those, especially if you're short of greenery. So where I cut it there, I've got a little stubby bit there, so I cut it really close to the next leaf. And that will give me another bit of green. So I don't really want this bit of greenery to show up. I'm just going to tuck it in low and punch it all together. And it just starts to fill out some of that, the top surface of the grid. But also it sort of gives me a sort of natural flower frog to fit into the container. And then I want something else, my skimmer. So bearing in mind that you're looking at the front, I've got the skimmer there. I quite like that as a central area. So push that down into there, like that. You just start to see that filling out. I don't want to come any higher with my greenery. I'm rather hoping that my cosmos is going to fill in this empty space. I'm sort of creating a crescent of the moon, and I'm imagining that I'm going to have some flowers, some of my flowers silhouetted in this area in the centre. So I need to sort of fill out a little bit first of all. So talking about that centre, I might put some of my grapevine leaves in, cutting the stems, and this will help because they're quite large and they will have a little bit of drapage over the top. I just need to think about that. Is that too big? I'm just worried it might be too big and too floppy. So let's come down to the slightly smaller Virginia creeper and whether that sits a little bit better. I think that sits a little bit better. And see, already that's started to cover up the tape, but it hasn't covered up the dish itself. It's just disguising the edge there. And I might add a little bit of colour with this one that's part turned colour, like that, to fill it out. And then, of course, doing the same at the back. So although this is going to be an all-round, it's going to be a front-facing arrangement, at the moment, the back is looking a little bit better. So it's got a definite back, a definite front. If you know your container is going on your coffee table and will be seen, you need to make sure that the front is looking as good, the back is looking as good as the front. So I will concentrate on the front so you can see that there. And then I just need something to hold this down. So I'm going to get a little bit more of the, I might put some of the Virginia creeper in the back just to try and just fill out that little bit. It will stand up, but I'm not going to worry about that just too much at the moment. So let's think about what we can put in here to fill in the gaps. So I want to keep it seasonal, and I'm going to go in with my rose hips. So I've got several stems of rose hips, 3 stems of rose hips, And the way I've picked them, they are slightly different lengths. So before I start cutting them, I'm just going to look at them and say, there's no point in me cutting my longest one down and then discovering I need a bit more length. So that's the long one. I can cut these two down any size. I've got a stubby bit here. So I need to cut away that because I don't want to see that. And then before I cut these two, I need to be thinking, well, where do I want them to stand? So I've got this line here. And I'm thinking I want, perhaps one head here and one head there. Let's see how that goes. And if you have got rose hips in your arrangement, they do. This one doesn't have many thorns, but it certainly has thorns on it. So just be careful. So I need to thread that through into my little gap and see. Ooh, I think that needs to be a tiny bit shorter. You can see that's standing up. And then this one needs to be a little bit longer. Shorter. There we go. So you can see that one there, that one there. So there, again, we need to make sure we've got lots of materials in there to hold them up. And this one, I'm going to save that one for later when I've got more materials there to anchor it down a little bit. And then I mustn't forget to use my my maple leaf. So again, it's got beautiful colour, but it is starting to turn. It's going slightly crispy. And decide how much of that leaf edge that I want there. Do I want it to echo the shape of the bird, the beech, or do I want it to come down lower? Do I want to put it in here? This one's going to be disappointing. Do I want to put it up like this? And do I want it to be as busy and frilly as this as well? Or do I need to cut out some of the leaves to make it lighter weight? So to begin with, I'm going to cut it the length I think I want it, get rid of the leaves here, and then slide that in and have a look at where it's going. I think I prefer that to my piece of beech that is doing the wrong thing, but I'm not going to take it out just yet because I might need it. But I can, when I come and look at the end, if I think it's not successful, I'll take out the bit that was bothering me. So there we go. Looking rather lovely and starting to fill out a little bit like that. I'm just going to hook it around that butt and it will stay in place there. So it's sort of coming a bit bigger than I thought. And again, if I think it's going to be too big, I can nestle things down a little bit further and just reduce it to size. But I have got quite a large area that I want to do it in. And I'm thinking, should I just be brave and take this one out? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I should stop fiddling, really. I'm not sure. But you can see how that starts to fill out. And then I've got these lovely gaps up here again. So I'm going to come through, perhaps with some of my flowers. I specifically want to use the cosmos because we only have a few of those. And if I don't use them, my husband will be cross. So I'm, again, cutting out the little stalky bits, holding them up where I want to go, and trimming them to fit. So this is a nice, lightweight plant material, and it will just sort of hover as it goes. And then the other one, again, I want them at slightly different places. Perhaps I could have that one coming out there. Recut the stem and slide it in. So you can see that the more materials I have in, the more that they will stay where I want them to stay. It's when you've only got a few materials, you're thinking, why can't I get plant material 1 to stand upright? It's because you haven't got enough of a grid, a network to keep everything together. And whether I want to use the snapdragon, so is that saying summer or is it saying autumn? I don't know. We've got them, let's use them. So I'm thinking here, perhaps as a sort of to balance out the cosmos there. There is a slight curvature at the top of the stem. I think if there had been, a dead straight flower, perhaps a rose might be difficult to sort of get a sweep with, but you'll have to play with that if you have got roses. So I've cut that to length and then slide that in just very gently. Slide that in. Yeah, looking good. The next one, and think about where it's going to go. Perhaps I want that in more from the front angle. I want it lower, I want it a bit higher. So this one's got quite a bit of leaf. I don't want any of that in the water, so I can just rub that off. and then put it in. I'm measuring my side here, and then coming and just starting to trying to find a hole and wiggling. You see a little twist. So I've got 2 bits of colour up here, but a lot of green stem here. So I'm going to put the next one in quite low down and get the flower head of this last one to cover up some of the stems. So you don't think, oh, what's this stem going on? Your eye will land on the flower head here. But this has got a lovely little kinky movement. So that needs to be quite short. And take off the green. And then I'm doing this back to front, so I can't quite see. And in fact, I reckon it could be shorter. So always wise to err on the side of caution. Cut a little bit shorter, but don't cut too short. I can always make it shorter, but of course you can't add on extra length. So there we go. If I move out of the way a little bit, you can see how that's starting to fill out a little bit there. I have got some more autumn colour. So this will be good for, again, filling out the base. I've got a mixture here of cedar from my garden and then just a random stem of chrysanthemum. So that will give a nice solid finish to the container in the middle. So I'm going to go really short with it, well, really short, about 20 centimetres long. And I'm going to put that down into the middle. I'm just looking here, I feel these leaves are a little bit too dominant. And I'm going to see whether I can feed that in there to get something a tiny bit lower, which will be much easier to do if you're actually looking at the front of your arrangement rather than trying to arrange in the front of the camera. So I've got a little bit there. I'm going to then make this travel. I've got another piece, and this one I might put right in the centre, quite upright, but not as tall as the ivy head there, because of course when I'm looking at it, I get the front view, but my eye will actually see the flat top here. So I want something nice to see at the top. And again, I'm just going to wiggle that out. It's not quite short enough. Cut off another couple of centimetres and then wiggle that down. So that sits quite low. And again, it's really helping to fill out my container. In terms of colour, I've also got some alstroemeria, and I'm not entirely sure whether I want to add these in or not, whether they're too full of flower, whether they're going to be too visually heavy. I think they'll be too heavy if I have them up at the outer edges, but what if I had them, perhaps they would look nicer than these leaves. I'm just wondering, and especially because the alstroemeria has got a slight curvature to the neck, I'm wondering whether, I don't want to take anything out, but if I could cover up those leaves and just sort of diffuse them. Oh yes, I just feel that gives a sort of better backdrop with the leaf a little bit there. And then I have another one as well, and this one I'm going to tuck in the back. You can't really see it, so I'm just going to bring it across to the back of the arrangement so that when I am looking from the front, my eye will land on this one, and then you'll find a pair, which your eye always wants to find a matching pair and to make groups and things like that. So this one here just got three little flower heads on the back. I'm going to add that into the back there. It's just right next to the sedum, and I will show it to you around the back. Let's just be ultra careful moving it around. So that's what you see. So my eye can see when I'm looking at this from the front, the low alstroemeria, and then I can see the other alstroemeria at the back. So it's creating a nice little bit of rhythm and flow between the two arrangements. And just spotted that in my bucket. Slightly wet, so I'm just going to shake it gently. And I did notice there was a little bit of a gap down there. I think that is the gap I wanted to fill on the top there. So I'm probably not going to use those lovely white snowberries that attracted me this morning. But one thing I do want to use is my old man's beard. Let's use that. Can you see if I put the old man's beard in somewhere, it's quite busy and frilly. So what I'm going to do is to trim off the leaves and just expose the seed heads. So you just need to concentrate while you're doing this, because you don't want to end up cutting the seed heads. It's the leaves I'm trying to get rid of. It's just exposed a little bit more. So again, I'll probably add in some more of this when I'm working later, when I can turn it around, but just to get that sort of autumn flow really. And where should I have that? I could have it just gently across the edge. Perhaps I should have it blowing out of the side, just a little bit coming down. Not quite sure about that. And I'm noticing there that I've got a bit of tape showing still, so I need to just have a little bit of thought about that. In fact, I might just spin this around so I can see where I'm going with it. Cut off the stalky bit and make it into 2 pieces, and then the stems will be in the water. And just running it down, finding a gap. So to begin with, nothing was holding up, but now I'm thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure whether I can actually get my stems down into the water. So I'm just pushing them down a little bit, feeding them back through that sedum so it's not too visually heavy. And I think probably we are just about there. So I will clear the decks a little bit. Perhaps stand up so you can see that just against my kitchen worktop. And notice the little bit of dainty flower here, the visually dominant, the heavy part of the arrangement here, and then just those cosmos just echoed slightly here. I'm just going to separate them out so you see the snapdragon as 3 separate snapdragons and not just one blurb. And that is your finished foam-free arrangement. I just went to pick that up, and of course it's not heavy because there's no water in it, but perhaps as there's no water I can just hold it through. So as you get closer you can just start to see the sort of tapestry of all those different contrasting colours, forms, the shapes and the textures as well. So I will be putting water in that and then enjoying that on my side. And of course, if things go over, I've got the opportunity of just wiggling them out and I could put something else in. So the cosmos isn't going to last particularly long. The snapdragons will probably fade within the week. But everything else is, again, it's those winter things that are quite autumn things, I should say, that have been flourish, and they should last quite a long time, I reckon. So what I'm going to do is take, stop recording. I have a mental block then. I will stop recording and say goodbye to our ladies who are watching the recorded video, and then I will, I can't take you physically off mute, you have to unmute yourselves. I unspotlight myself so that we can have a chat. So I shall say goodbye and see you in a minute.